Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of STEM Girls Virtual. My name is Emily, and I'm here on behalf of Cincinnati Museum Center. On this show, we talk about different careers in the STEM fields, those fields being science, technology, engineering, and math. Today, we're speaking with Amanda Kehres, Director of Quality Assurance with Graeter's Ice Cream. Amanda, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. First question is, you work for a Cincinnati institution. I think when people think Cincinnati and ice cream, they think of Graeters. And Graeters is celebrating a really important birthday this year. It's 150 years old. Can you just give us some brief history of Graeters, how it started, and go from there?
Absolutely. So in 1870, Louis Graeter started selling ice cream. He actually sold it out of a cart and kind of peddled to Cincinnati street markets. I think one of the interesting things about that scenario is actually he sold ice cream and oysters because he had ice, and that was a commodity at the time that wasn't available. So interestingly enough, not something that I would have anticipated being combined, but
no,
you know,
clearly the ice cream was more popular since we don't have Graeter's oysters.
Yeah, thank goodness. That would be an odd combination. But anyway, he unfortunately was killed unexpectedly. He was struck by a streetcar, and his widow, Regina, actually took over and grew the business remarkably. So she kind of had a vision. She expanded, had a storefront, began, making the ice cream in higher volumes, and helped to escalate the business to where it is today. And the company is still run by the family. The generations of Graeters are still working within the company, still responsible for the day-to-day activities. So I think that's amazing. They did expand recently. 10 years ago, we built a new building. So we have a pretty new facility. It's large and allows us to keep up with the demand of the business, but they've maintained the integrity and the same old way of making ice cream through the whole expansion, which is really awesome.
Yeah, and it's delicious ice cream, and they're really famous for using something called the French press process. Can you kind of explain what that is and why they're still using it today?
Yeah, so we use French pots to make the ice cream, and we make it 2.5 gallons at a time. So a lot of, or most ice cream manufacturers use barrel freezers, so they can make a lot of ice cream at once, which is obviously more efficient, less costly, but the family is stubborn and has continued this method of making ice cream, which in many ways is antiquated, but it allows us to put out an exemplary product with super high quality. We don't whip extra air into the product, so it's a super, super dense ice cream. And we have a team of skilled ice cream technicians that make every single batch of ice cream. So to envision the quantity of ice cream or the volume of ice cream we're putting out in a year, manufactured 2.5 gallons at a time is amazing. We actually just hit 1 million gallons just last week for the year. So it's a lot of ice cream.
Yeah, and people are buying it. So
yes, yeah, thank goodness.
For sure, yeah. So you are a microbiologist. So can you tell us what microbiology is and what about it interested you?
Yeah, absolutely. So microbiology is the study of microorganisms. So that includes bacteria, viruses, fungi, all kinds of different things. I fell in love after I took the first class. So in college, I took it as part of my normal curriculum and immediately was just amazed. It's really interesting and exciting, all the different little guys that are out there, and the methods that you can use to identify them, the things that differentiate them. So yeah, originally I thought I wanted to do more clinical microbiology and clinical studies. And so I did that through college. And my first role was in a food manufacturing facility in a corporate lab. And being able to apply what I learned in school to the manufacture of the food that we consume every day really was intriguing. And so I never looked back.
to follow up on what microbiology is, have you always been interested in STEM?
I think ever since I was little, yes, in one way or another, I was always interested in science. I wasn't quite sure, to be honest with you, how that played out really until I was in high school and started to look and learn more about biology and just how that applies. Was never really exposed to microbiology at a high level until college. And so that really kind of drove my path.
Nice. And so another follow-up I had is you mentioned you worked in a lab. So labs are classified in different ways. So can you kind of tell us what the differences are between like a BSL 1 or 2 lab, what those distinctions might mean?
Absolutely. So BSL stands for biosafety level. So labs are classified or categorized based on the microorganisms that they're working with or that are present in their lab. So 1 is the least hazardous, basically, and then it goes up to a 4. So a 1 would be something that they're working with pretty ubiquitous microorganisms, which would be things that are, present in nature pretty regularly and are unlikely to cause disease or illness in a healthy human. So still a lot of safety measures are in place, but obviously as the risk progresses, more safety measures are in place. So for example, like a biosafety level 4 is extreme risk and a lot of times threat of death. So an example of a microorganism that would be in a BSL-4 would be like Ebola or smallpox, something like that. So in those levels, you're fully garbed up like a whole biohazard suit. You have a hood where you're using and doing all your analyses within a cabinet, so you're not actually directly exposed to those bacteria.
Oh, wow. I'm glad they take all those safety measures. Yeah, that's a high pressure job. So we're kind of living in a weird time right now with COVID, but what kind of challenges have you faced in your role, either during COVID or pre-COVID? What's that look like for you?
I mean, I think honestly, some of the challenges are the exciting part of my days. I really enjoy that aspect, really, the way I'm able to apply microbiology in my current role. I'm actually overall food safety and quality assurance. So I'm able to take the science and the skills that I've learned through my experience in school and working in labs and apply those to day-to-day manufacturing. So what that means is if we are doing our typical testing and we come up with a high count or something unexpected, we do an internal investigation. So we basically get to be like little detectives. Where did it come from? Why did it start? What didn't work within our system? So that can be challenging and frustrating at times, but it's also exciting once we figure out the cause and kind of come down to the bottom of it.
Okay, and so you already answered part of this question, because on the flip side is, what's your favorite thing about being a microbiologist? Anything else to build off of?
I think obviously the investigation part of it, but I think the other side of it is with that knowledge, I'm able to help educate my team and help them understand why things are happening, and also how to apply that to their day-to-day lives. So I really enjoy helping people understand why we're doing what we're doing and the science behind it. And again, being able to just, knowledge is power. So you're able to help apply what you know to your day-to-day life, how to cook safely in your home. What should you do if you're sick, and how can you minimize the spread of an illness in your home, things like that.
Yeah, so everyday practices that you can learn from work, but then take outside of work with you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you have a typical work day when you're working from the plant or from home?
Every day is different, honestly. It just depends, which again is another reason why I love this role. But overall, now as we've grown, since I've been there over the last 6 years, I now have a team that helps me do all of the things that are necessary. So we have a food safety system. So a lot of different components within our manufacturing system that help us ensure that the product we're putting out is safe, both from a microbiological standpoint and also the quality that we expect. So on a typical day, my team does all kinds of analyses. So they're testing ingredients, they're testing finished products, they're doing what's called environmental monitoring, where they're going out and swabbing different areas of the plant, looking for pathogens or microorganisms that shouldn't be there, and that leads into that investigation, right? But we're also testing the system overall. So what's working, what's not working, how can we make it better, and keep educating our teams.
Sounds like a really neat job.
I love it.
For sure. And if Graeters ever needs a professional taste tester, you just let me know. I'll have a side job.
Absolutely.
So we've talked a little bit about your favorite things and about being a microbiologist, some of the challenges you face. Do you have a most memorable moment in being a scientist, or like, is there a day that sticks out where you're like, this was an awesome day in my role as a scientist? Do you have one of those, or a couple?
I mean, I think, yeah, probably a couple. I would say, honestly, anytime we have a big investigation and we figure out what the answer was or why something happened, it feels like it's a win. You know, we contributed and we're making sure our consumers are safe. And to me, that's really exciting. We're making a difference. Also, I think, you know, after we have regulatory audits, so the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, comes in and they monitor our facility to make sure that we're producing a safe product. So anytime after we have a successful audit, it's just validation that everything is working together in concert to make sure that again, we're doing what we need to. So all of those little things are really great, and it makes me proud that the system we have in place is working, and all of the efforts that everybody put in are there.
That's amazing. Yeah. While you were talking, before you brought up the FDA, I was going to ask, how closely in your role do you work with the Food and Drug Administration? And it sounds like pretty closely.
Yeah. So my role honestly has evolved. Initially, when I started, I was the only person in quality assurance and food safety. So I did a lot of it on my own, you know, independently with the team, of course, but you know, testing the ice cream, dealing with audits. Now, again, over the last 6 years, the team has grown significantly. And one of my main responsibilities is dealing directly with all regulatory bodies and handling audits and making sure we're in compliance.
Okay. Besides the Food and Drug Administration, what other organizations are you working with to like make sure you're following regulations?
The ODA, or the Ohio Department of Agriculture, they have a dairy division which oversees our ice cream plant. We also have a bakery, so we have the food safety division handles the bakery side of it. And then we also go through annually, it's called we work with a third party to do a voluntary audit that goes over our food safety and quality systems, and our choice of certification is SQF, which stands for Safe Quality Foods.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really great to hear of all the different ways that Graeters is ensuring that their ice cream is not only a quality product, but that it's safe for its consumers.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Absolutely. They definitely are very, very passionate about that. You know, maintaining the legacy of a high quality product, but obviously making sure that it's safe to eat too. So
yeah, that's awesome. Now, you're a microbiologist, you studied it in college, but you have so many more responsibilities with Graeters. How does microbiology assist you in the job you have now as the Director of Quality Assurance?
Well, we use micro daily. We are doing testing on products, ingredients as they come in. We use microbiology to qualify suppliers. We also do some chemistry in there. we also use it during investigation. So if we're doing testing and we get an unexpected count or have any questions, we do an investigation, which typically includes micro testing. We also do a lot of validations and verification. So anytime we get a new piece of equipment, we do a validation against how we're going to clean that equipment, or baking a product in our bakery. How do we make sure that the product is baked through so that all the bacteria that could be present would be killed? And then regularly verification. So a lot of testing to make sure, again, that the systems that we have in place to make sure that the food we're manufacturing is safe are working and are functioning the way we expect them to.
Awesome. And you've touched on testing throughout the interview, but it sounds like it's very intensive, and you do something also called like validation testing. What's that?
Yeah, so we do, like you mentioned, a lot of testing. Validations can range really anywhere, again, from simple microbiological plating, right? Looking for organisms or presence or absence of them, some basic chemistry testing, but also something like probing a product to make sure we get the internal temperature high enough to kill the suspected bacteria that could be present, and proving that. So a lot of the work that we're doing is in an effort to prove theories that we have and to document what we're doing, so that when we are audited by a regulatory body such as the FDA, we have proof that what we're doing is working.
Okay. Yeah. And again, I said it earlier in the interview, but it's really nice to hear of all the testing that goes on to ensure that people are safe while they're enjoying not just a summer treat, a year-round treat. Let's be honest, it's a year-round treat. Yeah.
Yes, we definitely take it seriously, do an extensive amount of testing. Again, a lot of it is microbiological, but we're in the lab regularly making sure that ice cream's safe.
Okay, awesome. So I have a little bit of a silly question before I ask a couple more, but do you have a favorite flavor of Graeter's ice cream?
That's a good question. I would say probably my all-time favorite is pumpkin.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Not a lot of
good
people
one.
tried it, but it's amazing. Yeah, I think that there are so many delicious options. So it's hard to choose, but I think that one mostly because it's something that's seasonal and can't get all the time. So
Yeah.
get really excited.
It's a good flavor for sure. Yeah, so that was my most pressing question in all of this interview is what's your favorite flavor of Graeter's ice cream?
Okay.
So if people are interested in learning more about microbiology or food science, can you recommend any sources that might be good for them to follow up on?
There are so many, obviously on the internet, there's so much information out there. I think one interesting thing is a lot of universities actually make a lot of their course information available if you dig deep enough. So honestly, I use that a lot to train my team. I'll look for information. So that's great. YouTube is also another great one, surprisingly. Videos about how bacteria multiply, or identification techniques. So there are a lot of really interesting videos out there. But another thing I think is even more informative would be job shadowing and internships. So contacting, a lot of companies are super willing to let a student come in and shadow somebody in a role, and also internships. I mean, it's really priceless to be able to work for a few months with a team and kind of really see what happens day to day and how that job really is, not just on paper.
Right. Internships in any field are super important. Job shadowing is something too. If you're not old enough to do an internship, that's an option as well. So yeah, that's great. Does Graeters have, maybe not during COVID, but do you have internships and things like that?
We do. We have in the past, I've had people on my team, actually, ironically enough, one of my team members who's now been with me for 4 years, she started as my intern. So yeah, we absolutely are open to it. Obviously, we're pretty small, even though we sell ice cream, a lot of ice cream nationally. my team is still pretty small, so we can't take a lot at once, but we absolutely are open to internships and job shadowing and helping to educate and give people some experience.
Very nice. And my last question for you is, what advice would you give to young women and girls who may be interested in working in the STEM field one day?
I would say be persistent, be curious, and continue challenging the norms. You know, just settling back and kind of expecting things to happen, it's not always going to happen. So make sure that you're being curious, you're asking questions, you're pushing. Honestly, I'll tell a quick story. So my husband was in the military, and so through my schooling, I moved away in the middle and then came back. And so when I came back, I was going into my senior year, looking for a position within a lab. All of those positions had been filled. All of the relationships had already been made with the professors. And so it kind of left me in a unique position where I wasn't able to gain experience or more experience within a lab. And so I identified a lab that I was interested in, and quite honestly, I sat out in front of the professor's office multiple times a week for hours on end. I would study out there, but I would just check in with her. How's it going? Can I do anything? Can I wash lab dishes? Can I, do anything to help out just to gain experience? And finally, eventually, it worked out and I got a position working in the lab and was able to kind of finish out my college career working in that lab. So I think even if someone says no, figure out a way around it, be passionate about what you want, and keep driving.
Yeah, that's great advice. And yeah, definitely be persistent and determined. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for joining us today, Amanda. And thank you all for watching. Join us for another episode of STEM Girls Virtual, and we'll see you next time.